Welcome to this edition of Great Books, a lively discussion of a selection from the canon of exceptional literature. Here's your host, Jack Hatfield.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us for the Great Book Show. I'm Jack Hatfield. Our panel meets periodically to discuss great works of classic and modern literature. Jake will introduce our selection for today, a section of the book Reflections from the North Country by Sigrid Olson. Jake?
In the last decade of his life, nature writer, educator, and wilderness conservationist Sigurd F. Olson decided to write a book which pulled together the integral meanings and understandings he discovered in his 70-plus years of life journey. That book, Reflections from the North Country, which came out in 1976, was an immediate bestseller. The book consists of essays grouped under three themes: primal heritage, search for meanings, and the imponderables. Our discussion is confined to Part 1, Primal Heritage. Even as he studied agriculture, botany, geology, and wildlife management, he yearned for a full-time career writing about the canoeing, fishing, hunting, and many intangible aspects of wilderness experience. In 1947, at the age of 47, he took the risky step of resigning his position as Dean of Ely Junior College to write full-time. He served during the presidencies from Roosevelt through Carter, becoming one of the icons of the preservation movement. He had a hand in drafting the Wilderness Act of 1964 and in establishing nature preservation and wilderness areas. In 1974, he received the highly prestigious John Burrough Medal for nature writing. Perhaps the most personal gratification for Olson came when President Carter granted full wilderness status to the Boundary Waters canoe area on the Canada-Minnesota border.
My first question, I'm going to read a little bit here. In the starts off, it says, "We dream of times when there was room to breathe, work for challenge or strength, and courage, a chance for a man to carve out his destiny." Then he goes on page 5, he says, "He no longer faced a physical frontier, but a change in philosophy, a complete reversal of attitude toward that might open the door to a golden era, far more resplendent than the old. Never in man's long evolution have such ideas arisen. Never had a more dramatic choice, or one that can change his life most drastically." What do you think he means about this, all of a sudden, this golden era that's different from much of what he's writing about?
Are you saying that the golden era is to come, or the golden era was in the past?
To come.
Well, he says there was a golden era in the past, and there could be a golden era to come, I think. And the idea is hope, because we're at a crossroads where we can open our minds to the experience of the earth, or go the way of global warming. And so we have a new chance. And we can get back to when things were meaningful and mindful.
Somebody else?
It confused me a little when he talked about this golden era of the future, when practically the whole book is about returning to what we have lost. Mm-hmm. And the tragedy of our times is that we are no longer attuned with nature. We no longer follow its rhythms. We no longer listen to its silences. We just have lost something important. And so I was surprised there was going to be a better golden era in the future. And the only thing I could think of was that he did say we have to take our technology and blend it with environmentalism. And maybe that will make it better than the utopia he talks about in the past.
When you're harmonious with the rhythms of nature, then the golden age can appear, but not if you're not careful and are thinking about acquiring things and artificial constructs.
Yeah, but how is the future golden era going to be better than the utopia, which he keeps talking about in the past?
Every golden era is a new emergence of human consciousness, of where we've been, what we've achieved, and where we're going.
Let me read.
So it's in the learning that we're doing,
He thinks
and
we're on the
deeper
edge
learning.
of another chance for more ecological balance,
Or
a new
disaster.
consciousness of what it means to be man, and a new sense of what our destiny is.
Because he does talk about how important learning is and thinking about things.
Let me read something on page 7. We cannot forsake our technology, but must find a balance between it and environment. If we can use this backlog of knowledge to work toward the preservation of the land instead of its desecration, if we can improve the quality of life, change our priorities, achieve balance and understanding of our role as human beings in a complex world, this coming era might well set the stage for a richer civilization than man has ever known. This is the challenge of the new American frontier.
So all the good of the old plus technology.
Right.
He thinks we're set for a new stage of evolution. That's why he's got chapter 9, Evolution of the Mind.
He was saying the evolution of the mind up to now is the greatest miracle of nature.
He did.
Yes.
And it's continuing.
Well, we had this type of transition in the Neolithic age when we transitioned from the herders to the agriculture. We've gone from agriculture to the Copper Age, the Bronze Age, the Steel Age, and with the invention of computers, I think the future is not predictable. I think in the past you
Well,
could.
he starts, he
doesn't think
calls
either.
it the steam engine.
Right.
And you call it computers, but it's the same thing.
Right.
The automata will predominate over meaningful, mindful work.
Well, he says technology's gotten out of balance. Our manipulative powers have gotten out of balance, but it doesn't mean they have to stay that way. And the wilderness experience is what takes you back to the rhythms which will carry us forward into the future.
Yep.
So past is prologue.
Sure, always for him. He's a real evolutionist,
Yeah,
don't
he
you
is.
think?
Yeah.
And he keeps on thinking that that there are things in us that have been changed by the wilderness through our evolution, and we still have access to that. But we only have access to it if we go back to the wilderness and
Well,
feel
if
our
we find
roots.
a way to get in touch with these ancient rhythms, and going back to the wilderness is the way he did it.
Yes.
He's telling us about it. I don't think he would say you have to do that, but certainly that's his testimony.
And he's saying that the primal urge is in us, and all of our, as a hunter and gatherer and farmers and all that, is in our DNA. And if we get back to it and recognize it, then that makes us much more comfortable with life.
I think he makes a distinction, though, between instinct and what does he contrast?
Intuition.
Intuition. And so when you say that something is in your DNA, that becomes more instinct. But intuition, I get the idea, is more of a sense of species memory. That you can call upon from your unconscious. And so if there's a difference, then if you're controlled by your limbic system and the most basic animal instincts, it's not as good as highly developed intuition, which is a tap into your subconscious, which lets you experience the rapture of nature.
He has quite a strong statement here on page 21. Students of the brain are convinced we operate only in the upper 10 perimeter. Below it, like an iceberg, is a vast storage network of memories embodying all man has ever thought or experienced.
The spark is in there of everything.
Of everything, and that's like,
Well, that's Jung's archetype. I
There
mean,
were-
that's
yes.
really what he's talking about, is Jung's archetype.
Well, archetypes, but he believed more in the noosphere.
Yeah,
Well-
but this intuition, he says it's not only arises from the depths of that vast pool of racial awareness, which encompasses all experiences, like you said, but not only of our own species, but of all the forms from which we have come. And that's a really powerful statement, that we are everything that we
came before.
were once, that came
Yeah, but
before.
it's not instinct, though. It's more than
Yeah.
instinct.
No, he said it's not.
intuition.
It's intuition.
Yeah,
And intuition grows. That's what makes man different from animals.
with experience and learning, I suppose.
Then he says something that really took me back. He says on 23, real communication is not dependent on words or language, which I
Yes.
agree.
Right.
But it is an interplay between the mind of man and inanimate objects. Something great students of the human mind are just now beginning to understand. And he uses the example of a rock. An Indian held a rock, and I go, what is he talking about there?
I didn't get that
didn't.
either. I don't see that. I think if you learn a lot and hold the rock and understand where the rock has come from, then it can speak to you of that history. Like he talks about the land meaning more because he knows the history of the adventurers that walked there once and loved it. Okay, and I can get that, but I can't get the just picking up a rock, not knowing anything
the
about
rock
the rock,
is-
not thinking about the rock, and
The
all of a
rock,
sudden
is to get you
thought
out of your
it.
own self-ego. The rock is to have you focus on something inanimate out of what your normally thought process is.
But you need to find out things about that rock and learn things about that rock
I
and
think any
wonder
rock,
about that
you
rock.
can do that with any rock.
Well, the
Yeah, but
Indian interacted with it. I mean,
Right.
he knew what flint was good for and other stuff.
Who said it
And
was
so there
flint?
was almost a palpable interaction, is what he's saying. And we do that too.
Yeah, but I
mean,
don't think of that as
different things.
communication.
I don't either.
But that's the word that
He
threw
says
me when he
real
said it was
communication.
communication with the
Because
rock.
he's looking for connectedness. He thinks everything's connected, including human beings. And his hope for a better future is that we'll realize this. We
So
won't
is he
fight
a-
so darn much.
Is he a
Some
pantheist?
Eastern
Get that.
mysticism.
Yeah,
He's a
I think there
pantheist,
was a
then.
little there.
Not
No,
necessarily.
he's not a
He
pantheist.
believes in God.
If he believes in God.
Well, that's what
An
pantheists
emergent God is
pantheists
what he
believe
calls
is God is. It's not.
It is,
But
yeah.
it's-
And
but-
toward
but
the end.
he's-
Well, it's not here.
Once or twice.
But he's talking about being a part of the universe, the oneness with the universe.
But he's not a pantheist, though.
Okay.
In
a strict term,
very
probably.
technical sense, maybe.
I see some new aginess in there. I'm sensitive
Pre-new
to it
aginess.
because this was written a year after I got out of college,
Yes.
and I know what was going on at that time. And we were discovering ourselves and our
Yeah.
connectedness to the universe. And he actually experienced this stuff, and I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there's a lot of things about what seems to me is Buddhist mindfulness in here. Be here now, like
Yeah.
Ram Dass
Oh,
says.
definitely,
The same thing from
definitely.
the same period.
But a little different, and he's saying go back in the past.
He
So
was
it's not
pretty straight
it's be
laced.
here now, but
Same
also
thing, exactly.
be there.
Yeah, but he keeps referring to God with a capital G.
Yeah, his dad was a
Mm-hmm.
pastor.
Yeah,
a
and
very
one of the
strict
ways
one.
he explains it is that man cannot evade his origins. This is on page 48. If he tries, he is doomed to unhappy frustration. If he accepts the past as part of the divine scheme, he will know repose and balance and the illumination that comes with knowledge. Man with such a mind has probed for meaning. He has conjured up over the centuries the concept of an all-inclusive God, a God of reason, justice, and logic, has looked forward to the goal of attempting to create godliness in himself. And he goes on, and he talks about the realization of the kingdom of God within himself. So
After
he's not
quoting
a
Aquinas, if I'm
pantheist.
not
I don't think
mistaken.
he's a
New
New
Age.
Age.
Yeah.
I think he has a new concept
I
maybe
think
of God.
he's consonant with the, I mean, this is off the subject, but with the time of throwing off traditional ideas of authority or convention.
Not particularly. He didn't like the long-haired people out on the coast, and he thought you ought to be pretty straight-laced that way.
Oh, but he has a quote in here where he had great promise. He saw great promise in the current generation that they were going to make this new world.
Well, they were
And
all like you.
we were that young generation
Well,
when this
I
book
guess
was
we did
written.
it.
Well, we sure
Right?
screwed it up, didn't we?
Look at the
I
end
know
of
we're
this.
still looking to the
Yeah.
next generation
Look at
to
the end
solve
of this
the
where he
problem.
talks about Schweitzer. Or is it in 9 or
Right.
10 that he quotes Schweitzer?
On page 50, he's talking
Yeah.
about
Oh,
White
that
Schweitzer
was
on
He's really into
ethics.
Schweitzer.
Right.
And that really is
Yeah,
That's one of his big.
We are not, at this bottom of 50, we are not able to put ourselves at the disposal of the infinite and the will, which is the basis of all existence. When he says we enter into spiritual relationships with the absolute by our feelings and searching the mystery of life, it begins to make sense.
And there's that place where he talks about our desiccated nerve endings and feelings.
Yeah.
Was that the great silences of solitude
Yeah.
or somewhere
Yeah,
they
I
get
like
healed?
that phrase. Yeah.
Desiccated.
Oh, I liked what he said when we listen. We don't listen just with our ears, we listen with all our
Right.
senses.
Yeah.
Well, that
And we also, it's not just words, it's just this communication. He says someplace in there about, it's the same thing mystics talk about
Yes.
from all different religions.
when I read this, I was thinking about Simon and Garfunkel's song, "The Sounds of Silence."
Yes.
Meet my old friend, and
Yeah.
You know, Dave, what you said earlier, kind of, I didn't quite get that. What I got was it's this noble, Rousseau's noble savage, that he kind of romanticizes the Indian that's standing and looking out and at the shore.
The voyageurs were the people he romanticized
Right,
yeah,
the
right.
most.
And that kind of goes, well,
He wasn't that way, though.
When he quotes
was a
Diamond
mystic.
saying the search for the primitive is the search for the utopia of the past,
Yes.
I go, when was the past a utopia? Every age has its problems,
But
and you're looking with rose-colored
But
glasses.
every
and you're
age
saying
looks
it's a
back to their utopia to project the future they want to get to, is what he's really saying there.
Looking for the good points, maybe, of the
Well,
past, but I
no,
wouldn't call it a utopia of the past.
Well, in a way, if you look on page 48, he thinks that man's an ecological being, and he's looking.
Definitely.
He wants us all to be connected one with another with a certain sense of balance, the ancient rhythms, and all that.
Yeah, but
He says, standing at the summit of the ecological pyramid. He, meaning humankind, can look backward billions of years and contemplate himself. He cannot evade his origins. If he tries, he is doomed to unhappiness and frustration. He accepts the past as part of the divine scheme, which for him is evolution. He will know repose and balance and the illumination that comes with knowledge. But that's to push you toward the future, because further, he just says the struggle of the spirit now is down, it's a positive drive toward perfection. And he mentions the kingdom of God, which you'd expect him to.
okay, he says
Placate his
this
father's
struggle
grave.
for spirit has replaced the physical, and in his
Right.
evolution, psychologically, man's greatest minds have become aware of the emptiness of material striving. Well, that's from the Far East. That's Hinduism and Buddhism, and prior to that. So
I like the way he talks.
Could be Western just as well.
I like the way he talked way back on page 4, that we don't just have an environmental crisis, we have a sociological crisis. There's something missing within us if we're not in tune with
Yeah.
nature. It's
Right.
not just that we're
That's why we
destroying
got
nature.
desiccated nerve endings.
Yeah.
but have we always been saying that? We're not in touch with nature?
No, when people used to live in nature, I'm sure they had no problem being in touch with nature.
Well, that's not what he means, though. He means this deep, primal, mystical sense of the oneness of things. And
Yeah, but he's also talking about living in the time scheme of nature. He calls it timelessness, right? With sunrise and sunset and the different seasons.
well, the rhythms, the
And
ancient rhythms.
The ancient rhythms.
why? I mean, I think, why can't you be in touch with the rhythms of modern life, with the traffic and all that stuff?
Because it gives us a lot of tension.
Well, I think he believes you
He
can.
talks about it.
I think so too.
I mean, he's just saying that this is one place where I got my strength and resiliency and helped me become human, and I recommend it to everybody,
Well, I think
but it may
it all
not
comes
work
back
for
to
you.
a search for meaning. And if
Absolutely.
there is no meaning, then you have a problem. And so he found meaning in understanding the history of the world and his place in it. And you can do it other ways.
And he also says that someone just going to the wilderness and living, he doesn't
Won't do it.
recommend
That's
that.
not.
No,
And he's saying
he
coming
thinks it's
back
stupid.
into life, into our modern technology
Technological society.
is necessary.
But you see, we're transferring. We've come from agrarian to an urban society, and now we're becoming a trans-urban society. We're
wants
going beyond urban.
He wants to integrate a new spiritual reality.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's what he says at the very end.
Don't lose your roots. That's all he's saying.
I like the way he says, if you do go out and you do spend time living in nature and don't come back, then you lose something of your humanity.
Right.
You
That's
lose
right,
something
yeah.
of love.
Yes.
You can't be an
communication.
isolated entity in the universe. You have to have
Yeah.
community.
And unless you take something back from the wilderness when you go back to society, then the wilderness would have been for
Okay,
naught.
so now with the pocket gadget, we have increased our community outside the country to the whole world.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks
he
like
wrote this in
plastic.
'76.
I know.
He
I
didn't
know,
see
yeah.
the computer.
I know that, but what he's talking about, in fact, has come to fruition on a global scale now. On a global scale.
I suppose. Is
I think we're on
Facebook
its
is the
way.
salvation
I
of
think we're on
society?
our way.
I mean, he talks like there's a conscious energy all around us that we all can draw on
Right.
if we develop or redevelop the skills we once had in our new situation in the world.
Let me
But
reach
it's
it.
just the skills are within us a lot. We just have to tap into
Right.
them.
We've got to get them back out. We got to
Yes,
regrow
we
them
have to tap
or
into
nurture them again because we've forgotten
Go
them.
watch some beavers.
Here's my,
Well,
Okay. What page?
Those damn beavers?
I'm going to read this, I really like, at 48. If mysticism implies communication with the reality on which existence seems to rest,
I knew you'd like that.
man will well be on the verge of knowing the peace that passes all understanding. And take Thomas Aquinas' advice to look at the landscape of the universe. To know great minds have been pondering the riddle for centuries and still are not sure of the meaning of truth. I think that's
why he
his-
wanted to write.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, it's a search for. He didn't think he's there. I mean, the end thing. Saying,
Well, we can look
Right,
out
right.
13.7 billion years into the past, and we're still not sure that that's the end.
But I like the way he said, okay, everybody needs a dream, right? And his dream is the search for the ultimate, the knowledge of the earth, the universe, and man's relationship to it. But the steps to get that, no, the first step to get to that dream is to read and study the thoughts of great minds. And the second step is to use your genius to discover secrets about the world that you don't already know. And the third is to realize that you're not in it alone, that all men are seeking this dream. And I thought it was very important that he was talking about, like we do great books here,
Exactly.
studying great minds.
That's why I do great books.
He said he loves to go out in nature and just take a page
Of poetry.
Yes,
of
quotes.
poetry or an essay or something, and just ponder it line by line, all by himself, and says he comes to great ideas about what that writing means to him.
He's obviously very well read.
Yes, very.
In certain
He
areas.
writes pretty good too.
He writes very poetically.
He says on
Yes.
page 25, wisdom is a key to a fuller life. If a richer one for me is enjoying my environment to the fullest, then it is up to me to cultivate my awareness of all I see. So
Yeah.
wisdom is the guiding principle.
But that's what he means by the stone, too, contemplating the stone.
Yeah.
Cultivation of perception and intuition makes life more meaningful and worth nurturing. But on page 57, when he talks about the great dream, there, and this really is finally what controls everything, isn't the great dream that of finally growing into the vast world of comprehension and knowing is still very much alive. This is the grandest dream of all. This is what it means to be a man, and this is your golden age that we're always aiming for and never reach. It's on page 57, last paragraph.
Yes.
Right above the last paragraph.
Well, the last paragraph.
So what happens
one
when
too,
you
yes.
reach your dream?
You don't. You have a new one. You touch infinity. The eternal mystery at the heart of things. He's a real mystic.
The Ouroboros.
Whatever it is, he's a real mystic.
But he did say that when you start out in life, you should dream dreams are attainable. And
Right.
then you're normally going for physical dreams. But as you mature, you realize that the best
He
dreams
says
are
there's a progression.
ones that are spiritual.
And they're open-ended dreams, I think.
Yes.
I think so. Lifetime.
Well, that's what Joseph
Lifetime
Campbell says,
search.
follow your bliss. You know, whatever is, yeah, if you're educated, then you follow whatever it is that you're dreaming.
And I don't think he read him.
I'm going to quit my job now.
Well, that's kind of what he did when he went into
wait a minute.
writing.
Yeah,
There's consequences.
that's right.
What was your favorite passage in all this? Do you have one?
There's so many of them.
I did like the one I read before about conjuring up the concept of God. But there's another quote I really liked. The imagination of man brings him close to the doorway of the infinite, which encompasses all. I just love that line.
I found a scenario, it wasn't written that beautifully, but the whole idea of him riding a horse and he hadn't for a long time, and the guy says, hey, you know how to move. And that's what people need to do with dealing with the world. You know, knowing how to roll with the punches, and how to make it a part of your body.
The problem is that he had ridden before. No, he hadn't.
Yes, he had. Sure,
He
he had.
had, but not for a long time.
Right, yeah.
But it came natural to the body rhythm.
Yeah,
the
right.
It's
natural
better, or
rhythm.
you're
Because
going to
he
be
was
darn
canoeing.
sore.
Yeah.
So he was used to the movement of the canoe, so it was similar to the movement of a horse.
But it's the same kind of muscle memory. You're playing a musical instrument where you're really in it. That's what I think I got out of it.
Yeah, I think what he's saying is that once we get in touch with these rhythms of the earth,
Right.
then we can also easily transfer that to riding a horse.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Not riding a mule, but riding a horse.
Right.
Yeah.
donkeys not either. So here's talk about dreams. If spiritual growth and maturing of mind are what count, the dream of fulfillment is always within reach. The longing for Hudson Bay is behind me, but the grandest dream of all, entering the vast world of comprehension and knowledge, is still alive.
Yeah.
That's that open-ended dream, I think.
That's right, absolutely. The grandest dream.
Yeah, the grandest dream. So, anyone else's favorite?
On page 46, he says, we know much about the universe today, the answers to many questions. We may think the mystery has gone, but that's not true. It remains and always will, for science cannot explain everything, nor begin to comprehend the meaning of love, compassion, beauty, and timelessness.
Great quote. We have to remember that.
Eternal mystery at the heart of things.
It's tempting for such writing to be Jeremiah, that the world is ending, and what are we going to do about it? And we have to get. He's optimistic that we could be entering a new golden age if we mind our manners.
Well, what's your opinion of this section? What's the bottom line for you? Why don't you, Dave? We'll just go around.
It was fun to read. It's well written. It's optimistic and prescient because we're still talking about the same ecological issues today.
I read this thing, I've read this thing many, many times. I was glad to pick it up and read it again. And I use it as a devotional. I used to read a chapter a day. And you can go through it a lot. I have a lot of books I do that way. I was impressed that, and I also discovered that Schweitzer quote, and I'd forgotten all about that.
I enjoyed the evoking of different scenes. His philosophy, looking backwards, you have to know where you came from and all that. That didn't resonate with me at all. It's more of the right now, the rhythms of life and all that, which I really enjoyed. So.
He's a good storyteller, and he has the ability to take the story of the Indian with the rock and blend it into meaning, and it's a very good way to teach.